On Boxing Day, I managed to get out for a couple of hours fishing on my local pond. Conditions weren't too bad. It was fairly mild, about 7 or 8 degrees, quite a bit of colour in the water. Very little wind, just a light breeze now and again. And I fished a peg that I fished many times before with a 3 AAA Waggler with a hollow tip with a hole in it and a size 22 hook, very light shotting down the line so I could pick up some fish on the drop if necessary, or maybe, although I expected most of the bites to come when the bait got down to the bottom. My bait seen better days. I had about half a pint of old maggots that are 10 days old, I expect. And it was fairly overcast. It had been very mild, around about 13 degrees on Christmas Day, say down to about 7 or 8 degrees, but no frost or anything like that. I wanted to try out some different hooks. I'm experimenting with lots of little hooks at the moment. I've got loads and loads of patterns I've bought over the years, and this pattern are Preston Innovations SFL-B spade end barbless, size 20s and 22s, actually using a 22, and these have got a PTFE coating. Quite what that means I don't know, whether it's like a Teflon sort of thing. It makes them a bit slippier. It's meant to make them better for hooking fish. So I started fishing, say fishing about 12 metres out. If I was really into long pole fishing, I could easily fish that on a pole. So it's about 10 foot deep. But with a Waggler, it's nice and easy to get that range. Catapult a dozen or so maggots in every cast. Nice slow drop with 8s and 10s down the line. Just 2 8s and 2 10s. 22 is tied to 0.08, fairly fine fishing. And immediately I had a problem. I started to bump fish. The first 3 fish I lost or bumped. One of them, the maggot had gone over the hook. It chomped pretty well. I had double maggots on there, and they're quite small. The maggots are quite small where they've shrunk with age. They're a bit on the tough side, not brilliant bait. And then I started to pick up a few roach for an hour or so, the odd skimmer, 1 or 2 small roach bream hybrids. And I was still bumping fish. I was missing bites. When it had settled, time and time again, it would go down, get to a certain point, sit there for a minute or 2, and then start to see these little tiny movements on the float as it went up and down, and sort of thinking, what's going wrong? Starting to get to some conclusions with this hook. It's very, very sharp. It kept its point for the entire session, and I did end up with about 30 fish overall. Nothing very big. The best fish, roach and skimmers, around about 5 or 6 ounces. I think one of the hybrids was about 4 ounces. Nothing very special. I was striking upwards all the time. Now, when you're fishing at that range in that depth, you can strike however you want, and quite often on this pond you can fish a Waggler quite close in, just beyond your rod tip, in 12 or 13 foot of water, and you are going to strike upwards. And of course with a Waggler it's got to fold over. When you start to fish further out, the swim I fished in a previous video when I did the thing about using more weight, that's quite shallow. It's about 5 or 6 foot deep, and you're fishing further than 12 metres, fishing more about 16 or 17 metres out, and you do a sideways strike. But up to, I suppose, hour and a half into the session, I'm striking upwards, and I say I'm bumping fish, missing fish. And suddenly I thought, well, this particular swim isn't too confined. Some swims, because of the trees and bushes, a sideways strike isn't that easy. So I suddenly had this light bulb moment. I tried striking sideways, and I won't say it cured the problem, it didn't, but things got a lot better. I started to hit a higher proportion of fish, lose less, and so it continued till I packed up. Whenever you're waggler fishing, think about the best way to strike. Like I say, there are times when you need the sort of canal waggler fishing where you're doing a tiny little sideways strike, very light float, close range. Other times you could be on a big river fishing well out with a big bow in the line because there's a downstream wind, and you need to almost bring the rod right back behind you, and even then do several turns of the reel before you find that you've actually hooked a fish, as you pick up lots and lots of loose line. So getting the strike right is always a compromise, if you like. You've got to experiment on the day to find the best way. In that river scenario, sometimes you, instead of striking upstream, you actually could strike towards the bank with the rod pointing downstream. Say that there wasn't much drift today on the pond. The float sat fairly still. There wasn't enough wind to get the water moving, and there were lots of bites, and yet they were quite often chomping the maggot and chewing it. Well, I think I had about 3 skimmers in the end, 4 hybrids, and let's say 30 fish. All the rest were roach, nothing very big. 1 or 2 bigger fish rolling out there. I think they're carp. Someone said there's 1 or 2 new carp in there. I don't know, 5 or 6 pounders. A few small fish about as well. But it was good to get out for a couple of hours and get some bites. And I hope that this lesson of which way to strike when waggler fishing will sink home. And until next time, I'm still hoping to get on the river soon, although again it was rising today as ever, and plenty of rain to come. But until next time, it's goodbye for now.